A new baby is a magnet for relatives, friends, and neighbors.
When you're young, the potential for the direction of your life is limitless, or at least it's easier to pretend that it is. You're told that you can be anything you want, often being asked what would you like to be when you grow up. An astronaut, an actor, an Olympian, you may say. All equally possible with the work and dedication to such bold careers cast to the wind for now. The world truly feels as if it's your playground. Now it's just a matter of time. Time being the key to everything and is as ambivalent as it is cruel. Young children grow into beautiful and handsome men and women. Then those beautiful people eventually grow old, maybe losing some of that fervor of youth for twilight wisdom and savor of the very last taste. With growing bodies comes the shrinking potential. The choices become more restricted and the path more plain. That, of course, is if you're a fatalist. Others, non-fatalist, free willist if you dare, are more inclined to odds. Odds are fun and offer a bit of competition and, more importantly, freedom. Life goes from stagnant line to an interconnected web of you and others. A web may be too liberal in terms of the odds, more of a choose-your-own-adventure book with an unusually high amount of options. As you can always go forward, but never back. Setting down your path or book, you have a goal in mind you're compelled to complete, to be a greater version of yourself. The way you go about obtaining this grandeur has taken you down a path uniquely your own. You would like to become a city planner. Keep in mind, city planning is just niche enough to make my point, but I want you to know non-city planners may find a word of advice or two in this little monologue I prepared for you all. City planning it is. A vital part of any good community is organization. Organization provides so many needed aspects to society, like planning the growth of one city and making sure the hospitals are in a reasonable distance from the retirement communities. Those who talk about your city planning endeavors may even bestow you one day with the title of creator of the best city ever. A lofty ambition, but shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. You'll make forever homes in top school districts. Gerrymandering politicians will have their political misdeeds expelled with your metropolitan utopia. Nothing will get in your way, the path is set, and the way is clear. First things first, education. City planners never just fall into position. It's earned through long years of school with multiple facets of studying, like urban planning, sewage systems, and quite possibly architecture. School's expensive. Not always in monetary value, it's also that, but more importantly in this case, time. The fleeting nature of time is enough to drive anyone to the depths of insanity, add one's personal ids and egos, and fuck, it's another level of isolation. You're experiencing a lifetime of individual experiences that can never be replicated, only to be left with something as limiting as physical communicative methods like words and art to express an inexpressible perspective. This feeling is sonder, the feeling that each person is living a unique and complex life equal to your own. In your pursuit to become a city planner, you lose time that could have been spent pursuing an infinite webway of possibilities like time with family or becoming really good at piano, something else you've also been interested in. This little mechanic in the game of life is called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a simple phrase that cosigns the possibilities of one's life down to a two-word phrase. While you've chosen to focus on city planning as your career, you've lost that time spent not becoming everything else. This is the first of the many costs to come. That time will never be returned and you will no longer be the blank slate you once were. No one is going to be the unique culmination that was you on that particular day, and once that day is gone, it can never be experienced again. All that was offered, accepted or not. Opportunity cost is inescapable. You're constantly at its expenditure, as being limited to a singular perspective already puts you at the will of those odds. The cost is more apparent when you make choices like what school to go to, if school is even a choice you'd like to opt for. The world is rather big, and the internet makes it seem like we take up more space than we actually do. Having the ability to know what's happening in San Francisco while in New York near instantaneously tends to make you feel much more vast. Remote work allows for one to pursue these opportunities with even less sacrifice, as you only have one physical body, but through technology, you've created a puppet of your consciousness to complete the work. Traditionally, one may work a 9 to 5. This is colloquially known as a designated piece of time for labor consisting of a multi-hour block from the times of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., with a 30-minute to hour-long lunch break included within this period. If you're not familiar with this premise, then may I refer you to Dolly Parton's wonderful tune about how it's enough to make you crazy. During this block period, you are expected to work in exchange for compensation. Welcome to capitalism. In this block of time, the work may vary. Some types of work are performative, as in you are expected to meet quotas of progress each day, or to continually work the full 8 hours with the general understanding task must be completed. Other work is contractual, where compensation will be provided after the project is completed on agreed upon terms. Obviously, we do the work because hopefully we enjoy it and feel fulfilled after completion. It aligns with our passions in life. You should love what you do. Key phrase, should. Most don't. We live in a world where money is a required facilitator to living. That's just cost. Sure, you could go all survival mode and make every aspect of life out of raw materials like shelter from felled trees, but that's just not as common as it used to be, and isn't something that's known out the womb like burrowing animals. Cost more oftentimes than not has to be managed and fulfilled prior to the end goal, or in this case, being a city planner. You'll die of hunger or exposure long before you've even placed your first building. More importantly, you don't have to work, but your quality of life is going to take a drastic downturn based on your low income status. In the United States, there's just about enough socialist policies at play to not die in the streets. However, similar to how you don't know how to build a house from birth, you most likely don't know what programs you can utilize to receive aid. Connections with others can allow you to skip steps here and there. People just generally liking you or someone in relation to you can get you extremely far. It takes a lot more work and resources to become so good at a task or skill that you can't be ignored. Either way, as a 16-year-old joining the workforce, those connections or skill set you've developed are all null. You're at the bottom. This is good though, says the writing on the walls. The competitive nature of the workforce is essential to have the voluntary participants inclined to build one's work record or history, and the connections that allow you to supersede required skills. You're not the only one gunning to build the perfect city, and the competition is inherently going to be compared to yourself. Cost can be overwhelming, and it can often take over the original goal of doing what you love. Instead, one focuses on how to reduce the worry of cost to the maximum quantifiable amount. This can put those who focus on costs in situations tolerating bullshit one would normally never accommodate. Basically, you've been poor and you see a clear way out of being poor, and you would no longer like to be poor less than you would like to work a job you don't like. Very few actually enjoy staring at financial spreadsheets or finding the best insurance policy for clients. However, those who put cost over happiness do enjoy not worrying about said cost over being entirely happy. Most people don't like some aspect of their job anyway, and there's no point in having a shitty professional life if your personal life matches. Even happiness is relatively subject. The highs are only as sweet as the humbling lows. A shitty hard day's work makes that happy hour a little more happy, if you get what I'm saying. To struggle is to be human, and that struggle will follow into reaches of passion as well. There will be exceptionally hard city blocks to design. It won't all be sunshine and rainbows once and if you do ultimately become this well-renowned city planner. Though dedication and commitment are powerful forces of the undying human spirit, they're more akin to the flame of a candle, burning brightly when initially lit and then left to be subject to the breeze of the world. With time, the flame dims and grows, with the external forces at play. While on your journey to become max-level city planner, you may find the breeze to be more intimidating, and the cities aren't calling you back. Your flame is temporarily dimmed. Compromises must be made, and that data entry position would cover cost. A stepping stone onto greener pastures. It's only temporary. Day 1 soon turns into day 100, and then day 1000. The familiarity of data entry has sunk in, filing the correct reports to the correct databases, and ensuring any errors are remedied. You've become familiar with your coworkers and even go to activities outside of work together. These are arguably some of your closest friends. You live comfortably, not worrying about cost, and taking a risk to jump fully into city planning would be a risk even a daredevil may not take. Because though you haven't thought of cost in quite some time, the uncomfortable nature and skin-crawling feeling of being swallowed by cost still dwells in your psyche, so you stay. You tell those around you that you're a city planner and that data entry is just paying the bills. However, that sensation too begins to fade, and you really are just a data entry professional who does city planning as a hobby. How did life come from an open world and possibility to knowing that day after day you will be entering data? This was only meant to be a stepping stone. The odds were never in your favor, and statistically you've ended up in a position that corresponds with probability. I think the movie Office Space... Hey, sorry to interrupt the flow of the video. So turns out Disney now owns Hulu. Maybe there's a monopoly problem there, but either way, what that means is that they own the rights to this movie, and with Disney's copyrights, they don't want you to show this to anybody. With Warner Bros., they'll take all your money, which I'm fine with. Being poor is okay. You not seeing the video is more of an other problem that I'd like to address, and so this next portion of the video has been heavily edited to Abide to Copyright Standards, starring Ron Livingston and Jennifer Aniston, bases itself around this principle and gives a scenario where an office drone is released of his inhibitions and desires to continue working, and how his life drastically changes following this epiphany. Peter is an office worker at Initech, a Texas-based company that focuses on innovation and technology. He has become verbose surrounding his current position in the world. He's micromanaged and no longer feels that he can keep up the charade of white-collar corporate America. Some of his coworkers and staff members ask if he has a case of the Mondays, to which Peter ignores. On this particular Monday, Peter has forgotten a memo on the new standard format of TPS reports and is told repeatedly by everyone about this mistake, each person going into detail despite Peter having resolved the issue, several of his managers coming to him at various points throughout the day. Peter confides to his coworkers and friends Samir and Michael about his frustrations over at Tchotchkes, a TGIF or Chili's stand-in next door to the office. Peter's frustrations are not only with his job but his personal life too, stating that he also thinks his girlfriend Anne is cheating on him. Peter finally says that he knows Bill Lumberg, one of his bosses, is going to ask him to work this weekend. Peter, despite having a girlfriend, is interested in Joanna, a waitress at Tchotchkes, who he has hesitations about even talking to, which I don't think that's bizarre. I mean, he's got a girlfriend, even though he suspects she's cheating on him. Yeah. Michael explains that he likes his job in the software sector, but doesn't feel as though it gets the recognition it deserves. Michael explains that he could design a virus so ingenious that it would rip the company for millions without ever being noticed. Peter mentions to Michael and Samir that in high school, his counselor asked the class what they would do if they never had to work and had $1 million. Peter explains that if you liked to work on old cars, you were meant to be a mechanic, and says he never had an answer and never really wanted to do anything. Samir says he'd diversify the money into zero-risk stocks and options while also investing with his friend who trades in securities, not really answering the question of what he'd like to do. Michael explains his cynicism with the question as there'd be no janitors because no one likes cleaning up messes. The group leaves Tchotchkes and on return are informed by their coworker Mike Smikowski that they're downsizing Initech and that layoffs are sure to follow. We overhear Milton Wadhams, a meek and stuttering man, talking to the phone saying that he doesn't care if he's fired, as the company has already violated several personal requests of his, mainly moving his desk a numerous amount of times. Peter, trying to now leave the office in stealth, is ambushed by Bill Lumberg, who asks if he can, as suspected, work over the weekend. Later that night at Peter's apartment, he begins a conversation with his neighbor, who he can communicate clearly with as the walls are paper thin. Peter asks Lawrence, his neighbor, to come over, and they talk about what he would do if he didn't have to work. Lawrence says a threesome, then asks Peter what he would do. Finally, Peter laments that he wouldn't do anything. He would sit on his ass all day and enjoy his life and freedom. Lawrence says you don't need $1 million to do that. He has a cousin broke as hell who already does that. Peter's girlfriend Anne has noticed Peter is in a funk despite having a well-paying job with relative security and benefits despite the recent layoffs. Anne schedules Peter an appointment with a hypnotherapist who has had good results in helping people with various ailments like insomnia and quitting smoking. Peter explains to the doctor that every day he's worked for Initech has been the worst day of his life, and that every day going forward is going to be worse than the last. In short, Peter explains that every day you see him, he's essentially experiencing the worst day of his life so far. Peter asks if the hypnotist can instill false memories, so instead of being present at work, he instead feels he's been fishing all day. The hypnotist can't do that, but he does begin a process to see what he can do for Peter. As the hypnotism is underway, Peter is in a hypnotic state and is told to rid himself of all inhibitions, pulling out all the stops that make him hesitant to do what he's wanting to do. The hypnotist is about to snap him out of this relaxed state, but before this can happen, he has a heart attack, leaving Peter in this carefree state. The next morning, Saturday, Peter is in bed when his alarm clock goes off, and instead of going to the office like he informed Bill, his boss, he would, Peter hits the silence button and rolls back into bed. While listening to voicemails, Peter receives a call from Anne, his girlfriend, calling him a real jerk for just walking out of the hypnotism session like that, and to not blame it on hypnosis because it's all bullshit anyways. Peter hangs up on Anne and is immediately called back, stating no one hangs up on her. She says they're through and for a cherry on top claims she's been cheating on him. Peter, unbothered, rolls back into bed and goes back to sleep. Monday morning at Initech, and the whole office is gathered around Bill Lumberg and a new person. Bill is explaining some new timesheet forms when Michael overhears that Peter isn't here and he didn't come in for the weekend like he was supposed to. Peter, now at Tchotchkes, walks in and asks Joanna, the waitress he's had a crush on, what she's doing for lunch, and if she'd like to have lunch with him. Zero hesitation. Joanna tells Peter she's not really supposed to do that, and Peter simply says that if she's interested, he'll be grabbing a table next door and would like for her to join him. Back at Initech, the new person that was with Bill is now performing interviews on the staff, deducing redundancies and finding what staff members to lay off. Michael is eventually called in to be interviewed by the now pair of auditors. Something I didn't mention is that Michael's full name is Michael Bolton. In 2024, that may not seem like anything, it's just another name, but in 1999, Michael Bolton was a tremendously successful singer with a peak in his career during the 90s, producing tracks for such movies like Disney's Hercules. Michael from Office Space hates Michael Bolton. However, the auditors love Michael Bolton, and so our Michael lies about also being a fan of the singer. Back to Peter's storyline, we see the man sitting at the restaurant like he said he was going to. Joanna walks in and Peter offers her a seat, and she accepts. Peter notices a button on Joanna's suspenders and reads out loud, "We're not in Kansas anymore." A saying from the Wizard of Oz making a quip on her button, but also signifying Peter's change in his mental state. Joanna explains that it's part of her flair for her uniform and that she's required to wear 15 pieces of flair for her job, a superficial number, and that she actually just picked buttons at random. Joanna changes the subject by saying she doesn't really like talking about her flair. Peter is then asked what he does. He states that he works in a cubicle updating banking software for the 2000 Switch. Not only is this career monotonous, but it is not one Peter could have possibly told himself he'd be doing. Joanna doesn't know what the 2000 Switch is. Peter explains that all software is written on a 2-digit format instead of a 4 to represent the year, so instead of 1998, it's just 98. Peter then stops and says it doesn't really matter. He says it doesn't matter because he doesn't like his job and he doesn't think he'll be doing it any longer. Joanna is shocked by this statement, asking if he's going to get another job. Peter, free of this feeling of need, says no. Joanna says, "What about bills?" Peter says he doesn't like paying bills either, so he thinks he's just going to stop. Joanna asks what Peter wants to do. He says he'd like to take Joanna out for dinner, and after, take her home and watch kung fu movies. Back at Initech, Bill is asking Milton to move his desk once again. Milton, being a soft-spoken person, falls victim to this voluntoldism. Bill, to put salt in the wound, steals his stapler. Peter walks in and encounters Michael. Mike clearly wants to know what's going on with Peter. Peter explains how he's been doing nothing, and it's been everything he's ever thought it would be. Michael informs Peter that he's supposed to be having his meeting with the layoff consultants, and Peter, to our surprise, is eager for the interview, stating that it's been the best day of his life, a contrast from what he told the hypnotist earlier, and a contrast to his former life. Peter enters the meeting, being introduced to the consultants, both named Bob Slidell, and Bob Porter. Peter makes himself comfortable, grabbing the water pitcher and pouring himself a glass. Peter begins to explain that it's really a motivation issue. He only does about 15 minutes of solid work each week. The reasoning is that if he works his ass off and Initech sees profit growth, that Peter sees no difference in his life, more importantly, his paycheck. Peter goes on to explain in further detail that he has 8 different bosses, so when he makes a mistake, he is hearing it from 8 different people throughout the entire day. His only solace for working hard is to avoid being hassled by these 8 people. Finalizing the interview, Peter explains to the Bobs that the whole process is just enough to get someone to work hard enough not to get fired. The meeting concludes with one of the Bobs making some half-assed suggestion of a stock plan. Peter begins to leave Initech. Bill attempts to talk to Peter on his way out, as Peter was only there for his address book, only to have Peter sidestep him and continue exiting the building. Back at Tchotchke's, Joanna is pulled aside by her boss and is informed that she is wearing the minimum amount of flair, and that she's encouraged to wear more, however she is not required. A conversation ensues where her boss is essentially asking for more expression on her part, explaining that she should want to express herself through increasingly more flair, however is not requiring it, similar to working over the weekend for Peter. Back at Initech, the Bobs are conversing with Bill on who's to be let go. Apparently Milton was let go 5 years ago, but receives a paycheck every cycle due to a glitch in the system that has since been remedied. Mike S., from the beginning the employee who informed Peter about the layoffs, is also to be let go. The Bobs opt for not telling Milton about this, as they would like to avoid any conflict if possible, and are prepared to let Milton figure it out and hopefully just leave. Next, the Bobs bring up Peter, who they believe, despite his candid nature, is prepared for upper management. Bill is quick to disagree, calling attention to Peter's lack of attendance. However, the Bobs quickly turn the meeting into Bill's performance evaluation, mainly how long he's spending on TPS reports. The next day, Peter is shown going to Initech, where he parks in Bill's spot. Inside, Peter begins disassembly of a door. Bill arrives and parks in a handicap spot adjacent to his usual spot, where we see a tow truck soon arrive and rip Bill's bumper off his Porsche. We begin a montage of Peter enjoying his days, spending time with Joanna, watching movies, going fishing, and popping in and out of Initech, just generally goofing off there and telling Bill to fuck off. Bill goes and sees Milton once again, who voices he hasn't been paid. Bill says that's a payroll issue and that they actually need Milton to move his desk once again. In a meeting with the Bobs, Peter is informed that both Michael and Samir are to be laid off and that Peter is in line with promotion to manage a 4-man team, as the Bobs enjoy Peter's no-nonsense, straight-to-the-point approach. Peter is dumbfounded as Michael and Samir have been showing up to work and working tirelessly, and Peter's just been goofing off. Peter invites Michael over and asks about the virus he's always talking about. Michael explains that every transaction with compounded interest, which is thousands, leaves a fraction of a cent that is often rounded out. Michael's virus would take these fractions and place them in an account. Peter asks Michael why he doesn't do it, and Michael explains the risk isn't worth it. He has a good job. Peter asks Michael what if he didn't have a good job. At a bar, Michael and Peter are sharing beers. It's clear that Peter just told Michael about the layoffs. In short, Michael explains that his software is already made and works, but he doesn't know how to install it on the union software. However, Samir does. Back at Peter's apartment, Michael and Peter have brought in Samir. They begin to go over the case, saying that the worst that can happen in America is they'll lock you up. There's not any severe punishments like having one's hands cut off to persuade them. They begin to source the details. Back at the office the next day, they begin to execute the plan. A coworker walks up to the group and informs them that Mike S. was let go. Moreover, he tried to kill himself through carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. However, Mike's wife interrupted this. Mike decides he does want to live, but as he's reversing out of the driveway, is T-boned by a drunk driver. Hospitalized, but alive, and to receive a 7-figure settlement. To celebrate Mike surviving along with the payout, he's having a barbecue that all of them are invited to. The coworker then leaves and the group begins to install the virus. Once the plan is completed, the group sits in the carpool, having just been laid off. Samir is pissed because they had security escort them out, offended primarily because it's not like they were going to steal anything. Peter confesses that he did steal something. We're then given one of the most memorable scenes in cinematic history. After they partied, Peter is in the car the next morning with Joanna, headed to Mike's barbecue. Explaining why the men were celebrating, bringing her in on the details, to which Joanna exclaims, "So you're stealing?" Peter, hesitant, does some mental gymnastics to overtly say no, then points to the corporate greed that Initech and tchotchkes represent. Joanna explains that yes, she hates tchotchkes, however she's not going to go in there and steal money from the register. Peter makes reference to Nazi Germany for whatever reason as a lapsed comparison. Peter says they can talk about this later, arriving at the barbecue. There, Mike S. pulls Peter aside as he actually wanted to talk to him about something. Mike explains to Peter that he knows how he can get about being depressed over his job. Hell, Mike expresses that he was probably more depressed than Peter, and he had done it for 30 years. But you've just got to stick with it because sometimes in life, good things do happen. Michael and Samir are talking to Mike's settlement attorney about minimum security prisons and how they're not such a cakewalk like Peter had described. The same coworker who told Peter about the barbecue shows up and asks if he's here with Joanna. Peter confirms, and the coworker states that he'd better be careful because she's dated around the office, specifically Lumberg. This causes a fight where Peter drops off Joanna mid-argument and proceeds to have nightmares about what that possible encounter could look like. At work, Joanna is brought aside by her boss, who points out she's only wearing the minimum level of flair again, and that they had a conversation about how she could express herself. Her boss wants to know what she thinks about people who do the bare minimum. Joanna expresses herself to her boss by flipping him off and quitting that moment. Peter is at the ATM checking the bank account that the funds are being channeled into. It should be a couple $100, however, it's an outstanding $300,000. The trio of Peter, Michael, and Samir are now in the car rushing to Peter's apartment after he had just picked them up, with Michael guessing he possibly put a decimal place in the wrong spot. At Initech, a birthday party is being held. Milton is there and is told to take and pass each slice of cake given to him. Milton protests as last time there was no cake left when finished passing, however is strong-armed into doing so. When all is said and done, the cake is completely gone, with Milton standing empty-handed. Peter and the gang are at his apartment trying to source possible solutions. Ultimately, the group is left pondering money laundering. Back at Initech, Bill is talking to Milton down in his basement office, asking him if he has any spare time to kill cockroaches. Milton, keep in mind, still isn't being paid for the work he's been doing. One of the Bobs comes down from the main level, informing Bill there's a major problem as some kind of glitch in accounting. As the two men exit, they turn the lights off on Milton. Back at the apartment, the gang is looking up laundering in the dictionary as no one knows how to do it. It's revealed by Michael and Samir that Joanna wasn't sleeping with Bill Lumberg, but Ron Lumberg, an employee who moved to Atlanta several years prior, presumably no relation. A knock at the door can be heard. Peter tells the group not to freak out, it's most likely the neighbor. Answering the door, it's a magazine salesman from an impoverished area who used to be addicted to crack. Knowing that drug dealers launder money, the group invites the guy in and asks if he knows any drug dealers who could help. The salesperson drops the act and reveals that he's a software engineer out of work who used to work at the competitor of Initech. They've overtly just let this person, who knows a lot of the same people, in on their plan to steal money. They then have to sign up for 40 magazine subscriptions to buy the engineer's silence. Samir and Michael call it quits. About to leave, Samir tells Peter that he's a bad person for looping Michael and himself into this situation. Peter asks his neighbor Lawrence if he wants to come over, to which Lawrence declines, as he doesn't want Peter fucking up his life too. Peter dreams that night that he's in a courtroom. The judge tells him that he lives a very tripe and superficial life, and that he's a bad person just like Samir did. Out of bed and now at the kitchen table, Peter is seen writing letters with checks enclosed to unknown people. Peter is then seen outside the restaurant of where he first took Joanna, who now works there after being fired from Tchotchkes. Peter apologizes for his reaction to the whole Lumberg thing and says that she was right, the computer scam was also a really bad idea. Peter explains he doesn't know why he can't just do work and be happy like everyone else. Joanna explains that everyone else hates their job too, but it's about finding something that makes you happy, whether that be a particular aspect of the job or something in your personal life. Peter explains he'd be happy working a shitty job if it meant getting to be with her. She forgives him, and they kiss. Peter is seen at Initech after hours and slides his confession for the stolen money under Lumberg's door. As he's leaving, he turns back and grabs just a corner of it, reobtaining it, the confession, before leaving. Milton is at the secretary of Bill the next day and is complaining to her that he still hasn't received his paycheck. After being told to go sit at his desk as Bill would be there shortly, he mutters to himself and walks away, saying that this was the last straw. The secretary gets up and walks away in discomfort. After, Milton returns and enters Bill's office, determined to get a stapler Bill had stolen from him earlier. Peter is exiting his apartment with a packed bag and runs into Lawrence, briefly telling him he thinks he's going to be going away for a while. Lawrence tells Peter he knows. Peter goes to Initech, and there, he sees the building is engulfed in fire, presumably started by Milton. The computers, the evidence, and more importantly, the TPS reports are all torched. A few weeks later, we cut to the cleanup of the now rubblized Initech building, where Lawrence, working his job in construction, pulls a red stapler out of the pile. Peter stops him and is revealed to be wearing a construction uniform as well, stating he thinks he knows someone who'd really like this. Michael and Samir pull up in the usual attire of software engineers, asking if Peter would like to get lunch. Peter declines, having brought his lunch, and states that Joanna is supposed to come by later. They ask if he wants a job at the competitor of Initech where they now work, but Peter firmly declines the offer. They tell him, stay in touch, and leave. Peter returns to Lawrence, where he states that this isn't too bad, making money, getting exercise, and getting to be outside. Lawrence affirms that, yeah, it's pretty great, or fucking A. The camera fades as Peter happily smiles about his new life. The last scene is on a tropical island. We see Milton, who presumably Peter gave all the money to, sipping pina coladas on the beach and still being ignored. Fade to black, roll credits. This isn't a standalone full plot synopsis of the film, and my thoughts about it all. I just find that Office Space does a great job at showing a realistic, albeit hyperbolized and comedic version of the droll that comes from working a job that you don't really love, and to be completely honest, a job that you hate. Peter's experience in some aspects are unique, mainly the hypnotism bit isn't too common to my knowledge. However, the emotions he feels and the frustrations that ultimately make him hate his job are. Presuming that you get a healthy amount of sleep each night of 8 hours, that leaves you with 16 hours in a day. Now utilize 8 of those 16 being spent on or at work. This leaves you a meager 8 hours of recreation without the inclusion that one may have kids, as those 8 hours become smaller and smaller. Despite the depressing nature of the workforce, your job makes up a large amount of one's life. You could even go on to say it makes up half of one's life. In Peter's case, he hated his job, and it was his possible fear of cost that outweighed his desire for something else. There are a couple of philosophies presented throughout the film. Mike Smokowski, who was hit by the car, was a bit of an optimistic stoic, working a job he arguably hated more than Peter, but sticking with it because everyone hates their job, and why should he be the exception? Mike takes on a positive view. Yes, he tried to kill himself, but his other 8-hour half, his wife, is what made him really appreciate the life he did have. Mike, for so many years, was living to work instead of working to live, and with his layoff, he was finally free of the cycle, and with a clean break, no less. He tries to instill this sense into Peter about just sticking it out because eventually it'll all be worth it. However, it is flawed. It didn't work out for Mike. He was fired, as we talked about. He was freed from Initech, but he'd have to find another job eventually. It was only a sheer fluke by being hit by a drunk driver that he was able to escape the workforce altogether. All of what Mike S. says isn't completely useless, as he tells Peter good things do happen. This is an aspect to his personal life, but in Peter's case is different. Peter started out hating his job, but also hating his life via his girlfriend Anne. Mike S., as we presume, loved his wife, but hated his job. A job that, seen during the consultant interviews, was essentially doing something that didn't need to be done. In some capacity, I think Mike knew his job was pointless. Peter, on the other hand, provides a service that anyone could do, even better perhaps, but nonetheless a point-serving task. Throughout the movie, Peter constantly expresses his desire to be outside through either the wish for implanted fishing memories, knocking down his cubicle wall, or even the finale where he makes a remark that he's just happy to be outside. Additionally, Peter makes remarks that he wishes that there was less oversight, less people telling him what to do, and that he messed up. In Peter's new position, he's outside and there's not many wrong ways you can shovel rubble. More importantly, there's no TPS reports. His current position still provides value. He's clearing old buildings for the future and contributing in a more noticeable way to the growth of society. His time spent doing nothing is later met with scrutiny because it only takes from those around him like Michael and Samir. Peter isn't solely invested in his own success, but of the success of others he cares about and deems as hardworking, but looked over individuals. The whole message I've personally taken from this movie is that you don't have to love your job, and in many cases, life didn't pan out the way you thought, so you don't. You don't even have to like your job, you just need to like enough aspects of it to perform it for a while, and if you start to hate it, just get another one. There's always going to be some code to write, and there's always going to be some rubble to shuffle. There's a fellow by the name of Jimmy Cash on TikTok who's a janitor for an elementary school. Obviously, most people don't want to be janitors, but the way Jimmy shows us a glimpse of his world may make you think otherwise. Now that Jimmy is successful on TikTok, you see him having more fun, taking summer trips and enjoying his personal life. Early in his post, Jimmy, however, was pretty focused on just showing his day-to-day interactions. From the outside, Jimmy is cleaning floors, taking out trash, and telling us about some of the interactions he's had with his students. More importantly, Jimmy provides through his own words the value his job provides in his eyes. Yes, he's just mopping a floor, but in his eyes, he's facilitating the best possible learning environment for the kids, and making teachers' lives easier. It's all about the students for Jimmy, and in a lot of ways, he's helping to shape the kids' future as much as the teachers. Having this mindset truly will allow you to enjoy the most of an otherwise less desired job. If the purpose of the job is in the service industry, then take solace in the fact that hopefully you've made someone's time on this planet that much better. A bad day is a state of mind rather than what actually happened that day. I've had my car broken into 3 times in 1 week and felt more sad on days that just felt like particularly off Tuesdays. Having a drive or sense of preordained purpose is a blessing not everyone has. You should revel in the fact that you have a goal and desire. Just because you're a data analyst now doesn't mean city planning is completely off the table, because as said, sometimes good things do happen. Happiness, as cliche as it sounds, comes from within. You'll still roughly be the same person whether that person or not is an official city planner. Getting the title won't drastically alter how kind or ambivalent you are towards the universe. You may even lose that sense of purpose once the position is obtained in a process where this once desired dream, that was placed above all else, is tarnished by reality setting in. At the end of Office Space, I don't think it's Peter's changing careers that creates the sense of happiness we see him donning at the end, but the self-actualization that he obtained along his journey. In Peter's case, the inner peace obtained doesn't come from the release of possibly being condemned for wire fraud or the new job, but that Peter has the formula to be happy. Simply permeating existence and enjoying available resources is going to leave one feeling hollow. Sure, it may be desired while working at a shit office job to do anything else, including nothing. But once obtained, similar to the dream career, it will tarnish with time and sour in one's mindset if a greater understanding is not obtained. Life comes with ups and downs and good and bad days, and though that's not a hot take, I think that Peter, and yourself more importantly, have to come to the realization that we can identify desirable traits in our professional and personal lives that make that trending downward a little less steep. In the modern age, there's a battle between us and cycles of immediate gratification. You can essentially have anything and everything at your fingertips and your front door whenever you want it, and it'll only become more expansive and faster. People who built houses used to build houses because they liked building things. It was an art form and a craft, a reflection of one's dedication to doing something that not only provided a service to others but was worth doing because it made you happy. Building houses now, or even city planning as we've looped in, is becoming increasingly commodified along with everything else. Everything's a product to be packaged, categorized, and sold. This isn't to romance history or look back on a time that never was with rose-tinted glasses, because what I've stated isn't a unique perspective even to my time. I'm sure people in 1999 were saying the same thing. It just seems that everyone has this general consensus on how the world should operate and how things could be so much better, but we're all comfortable in our current job because it's secure and we like enough things about it to let it last. Moreover, this current state is the known, and similar to how Peter wanted to do nothing but eventually started hating that, I think with our mindset to the current situation it has to be the first thing to change before a change in occupation, so to speak. There's beauty in the everyday, and identifying said beauty isn't the easiest. Our egos tend to get in the way of looking at things objectively. The self is the enemy to happiness. It's hard to appreciate the exceptionally nice fall afternoon when your boss brought you in to talk about underperformance, or that a potential publisher decided they would be going in a different direction than your work. Objectively enjoyable days that match what you've historically told yourself and others in terms of weather are limited and can be ruined by bad days. However, your potential for bad days fluctuate based on your reactions to near unlimited chances. I personally lean to more of a proactive choice and give my thoughts to internal factors. I manage a small retail team, and whenever an employee has ignored instructions or failed to meet standards, I look internally to see if I missed listing specifics or failed to accurately employ the importance of said moment. This mindset doesn't strictly apply to my job, which I've come to like enough aspects to continue doing, but rather my whole worldview. It's far and few between that I will not find something that I've done to contribute to the situations that I'm in. And if somehow I conclude that I was magically faultless in the situation, then that's where sympathy, empathy, and understanding come into play. Just like you run late for work once in a blue moon, so do other people. Just like how you accidentally cut someone off in traffic, so do other people. People often don't get hurt from genuine mistakes, so just chill out. It's this ideology that I believe has me constantly reevaluating myself as a person and how I try to be more kind going forward. Working retail has taught me to meet a lot of slander or demeaning comments with a smile on my face, and to not react as a person who just had their feelings hurt, but rather a person who has a great life, and maybe, just maybe, by killing you with kindness and understanding, I can let you in on that too. Most of the time, I kind of do this thing where I feel more embarrassed for the person letting out whatever bad emotion. You, sir or madam, are being rude to a retail employee. Karen isn't a term I'm fond of, as I know a very lovely Karen, but others who don't know kind Karens would be inclined to label you as such. It's actually kind of insane because retail employees or anyone working a position are kind of shielded unless heavily in the wrong. I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe the universe to be alive and treats those who treat its creations well with favor. Getting less physical, my mommy raised me somewhat right, and I want to be good and do good things. Well, why? Well, as Jordan von Strangle once said, Timmy Turner, you are not a good person because you expect to get something out of it. You're a good person because it's the right thing to do. You could be the pivot point in someone's life that makes them reevaluate and go forward with the same mindset that you have. Most likely not, but if I was able to make someone understand that it's all peace and love out of a million, well, shit man, I guess that's just another hard day of honest work. That beer that I will ultimately be drinking after this interaction because I'm human too will be all the more earned because of it. It's hard to remember not to get caught up in a moment, to remember your training as they say in Kung Fu. Just be nice. Be kind, that's all. Don't develop a savior or messiah or superiority complex. You are equal in complexity and value to your fellow man. This is a good rule for breaking into the beauty that awaits your discovery in the mundane. You've been given the rare opportunity to be alive, to exist. Trust me when I say that your phone, or whatever you'd rather be doing, will still be there most of the time. Live in the present. Revel in the chance to become familiar with your fellow man. Count the small victories as just victories, and your large failures as honest mistakes and opportunities to learn. It's just such a wonderful thing to be able to learn, to grow, to pursue one's dream and bear witness to a metamorphosis to all the different people you will become. Some slightly different and others vastly apart, but in the end, all of it is you. Work hard, make friends, find something you love, just enough to keep doing it, and drink a beer or two at the end of the day, because you earned it.